And today's movie is set in 1954 and opens with US Marshal Teddy, a World War II veteran, and his new partner Chuck heading towards Ashecliffe Hospital located on Shutter Island. Ashecliffe is a federal hospital for the criminally insane, and all the patients are both mentally ill and dangerous. Teddy and Chuck arrive at Ashecliffe Hospital and are welcomed by McPherson, the deputy warden, who leads them into the grounds of the mental hospital. The warden shows them 3 buildings named A, B, and C, and Building A houses male patients, while Building B is for women patients, and Building C is a house for the most dangerous patients ever. The warden confiscates both their firearms after a heated argument about how they're both federal agents and that they're required to have their guns at all times, but the warden tells them that the law says otherwise and that they can't enter inside with weapons, and both of them unwillingly give up their firearms. They enter the facility and meet the head doctor, Dr. John, who explains the situation about the missing patient, Rachel, and he tells them that she ended up in Shutter Island because she drowned 3 of her children one by one. Yeah, pretty weird. Rachel is delusional and still believes that her children are still alive, and she's not aware that she's in Shutter Island and that all the inmates inside the facility are her neighbors and just people she encounters in her daily life. Dr. John also tells them that they don't know how she escaped the facility. They go to her quarters and interview the guards and staff about the night she escaped, and as Teddy looks around her room, he finds a note in her handwriting that says, "The Law of 4, who is 67?" When he asks Dr. John what it might mean, he tells him that he has no clue. Teddy gets suspicious and asks to see all the personal information of the staff, but Dr. John does not cooperate. But he does promise Teddy that he'll gather all the staff for him to interview. Later that night, the staff pointed out Rachel attended a group therapy before she disappeared, and a doctor named Shaheen led the session. He was also the one who directly checks Rachel's progress. And when Teddy asks to talk to him, they inform him that he went on a long vacation. Teddy and Chuck find this whole thing suspicious because there's a dangerous mental patient that just escaped, and even though there's a lockdown, her doctor is apparently allowed to go on vacation. And this whole thing just doesn't add up. Teddy gets a lot of flashbacks of his time during the war, and in his flashback there are a lot of dead Jews and a man who wounds himself on the side of his face as he is trying to end his life. Following the staff meeting, Dr. John invites Teddy and Chuck to his island mansion for a drink and a cigar. And when they arrive, another doctor named Nearing was already there drinking. Teddy asks to see the personal information of the staff again, but gets angry when they say that they consulted the board of directors who refused to release the staff's personal records. Teddy becomes so enraged that he breaks a glass and makes a threat to end the investigation and that he will leave early on a boat. That night, Teddy has terrible dreams about his wife, Dolores, and in his dreams, his wife tells him that Rachel is still on the island and that she needs his help. And she also talks about a man named Andrew. The next morning, the storm hits the island, so the boat will not arrive, and because of that, Teddy and Chuck begin to investigate again. They interview patients who were in Rachel's group therapy session, and all the patients appear to be reading from a script because they say similar things in their interviews. But there is one person who's an exception, and that exception is Bridget. Bridget writes something very quickly and gives it back to him, and when he asks her about Andrew, she shockingly replies that she doesn't know him, and she leaves the table. Afterwards, Chuck asks Teddy why he asked every patient about a man named Andrew, and Teddy tells him that Andrew is a mentally ill arsonist who started the fire that killed his wife. Teddy is certain that he is at Ashecliffe despite being no record of him, so Chuck suggests that they check the graveyard to see if he died here. Teddy and Chuck go to the cemetery as Teddy shows him the message that the lady wrote for him, and it reads, "Run." The weather gets worse and Teddy and Chuck find shelter to pass the storm, and while there, Teddy reveals the full scope of his mission to Chuck. Teddy learned about the inhumane and illegal experiments taking place at Ashecliffe from an inmate named George, and Teddy has been sent by a United States senator to investigate George's claims and expose any wrongdoings if there are any. Chuck becomes paranoid and tells Teddy that he believes that he's walked into a setup, but Teddy tries to reassure his partner and assures him that they will leave the island in one piece. The door then bursts open, and a car's spotlight shines on them, and it was apparently McPherson's car. He takes them back to the hospital and gives them white gowns to change out of their wet clothes, but both Teddy and Chuck didn't like the white gown, but they wear it anyways. He also gives them a pack of new cigarettes as theirs have been ruined by the rain. They then meet with Dr. John, who informs them that Rachel has mysteriously reappeared. They go to interview her, and she mistakes Teddy for her husband Jim, but when Rachel suddenly realizes that Teddy is a stranger, she attacks him, and this triggers one of Teddy's migraines. Dr. John offers him some pills to alleviate the pain, and Teddy takes them against his better judgment, and he falls asleep. That night, Teddy gets this really horrible nightmare about fire, and Andrew was there and he had this horrible scar across his face. And another scene then follows where he and bloody Rachel are shown, and they go outside and Teddy sees a little girl and he picks her up and he carries her to the water, and the little girl asks him why he didn't save her and he looks pretty sad, and the little girl then drowns in a lake as Teddy wakes up in terror. Anyways, the storm passes, but it's caused major damage and the backup generators fail and all the patients' cell doors were therefore opened. Trees fall over the hospital's campus with staff and officers trying to clean up, as well as gather up all the wandering patients. Teddy and Chuck seize the opportunity to explore Building C, where the most dangerous patients are being held. They find a patient on the loose, and as they chase after him, Chuck falls behind and the patient grabs Teddy from the back. And it turns out to be George, who looks to be really beaten up, and he warns Teddy that everything around him is a lie carried out by Dr. John. Teddy promises that he'll get George out of there, and George tells him that Andrew is no longer in Building C and that they've taken him to the lighthouse where they're planning to do a lobotomy on him. And if you guys don't know what a lobotomy is, it's a kind of a brain surgery, but not the good kind. Teddy and Chuck decide to investigate the lighthouse, and they arrive at the cliffs over the ocean and realize that they're too far south of the lighthouse. Teddy says that he's going to go around and tries to get there a different way, and Chuck tries to talk him out of it because it's dangerous to go up on the cliffs and it's also going to be dark soon. But Teddy resists and he goes on his own. He gets near the lighthouse but finds that it's late enough in the day that the tide has cut off the lighthouse from the island. He gives up and goes back to where Chuck was, but all he sees is a burning cigarette on the edge of the cliff. And when he looks over, he sees Chuck at the bottom of the cliffs with waves crashing over him. Teddy climbs down the cliff but doesn't see Chuck at the bottom. He then sees a cave in the side of the cliff with fire burning inside. When he reaches the cave, he sees a woman inside. They begin talking and she says that her name is Rachel. And this Rachel is a doctor at the hospital who found out about their illegal secrets, and they made up a story to frame her, saying that she killed her kids, and she tells them about the other Rachel and how she's an imposter that they use to fool him and Chuck. She says that there's a secret government program to test several new drugs on the patients to make them some kind of super spies or super soldiers who don't feel pain and don't have memories that can be tortured out of them even if they get captured. She then warns Teddy that they will not let him leave and that they will make up stories about how he went crazy while he was there. She asks him if he's taken anything at the hospital, it can be food or medication or cigarettes, and she tells him that it will take 36 to 48 hours for the drug to take effect, and the first sign will be tremors in his hand, which he's apparently already experiencing. And after speaking with Rachel, Teddy runs to Ashecliffe in search of Chuck. He finds Dr. John and asks him if he's seen Chuck, but Dr. John says that he came to the island alone and that he had no partner with him. Teddy realizes that they're already starting to put their plan in action by insisting that there was no Chuck. He then leaves and walks around the grounds trying to decide what to do next. And what he decided to do was to blow up Dr. John's car to create a diversion so he can sneak down to the lighthouse, and his plan was successful. He gets into the lighthouse and finds no operating rooms for surgical experiments, and he goes to the top and finds Dr. John sitting behind a desk. Teddy holds a rifle on him while he was talking, but he tells him that there are no bullets in the rifle. Dr. John tells Teddy that he's actually Andrew, who has been a patient at the hospital for the past 2 years. Teddy doesn't believe him and claims to be a US Marshal, and the doctor tells him that he was one, but after his breakdown 2 years ago, he was sent here to get some treatment. Dr. John explains that his wife Dolores was mentally ill and killed Teddy's 3 children, and Teddy, who was actually Andrew, shot her in the stomach. Unable to cope with what he had done, Teddy became delusional and he was sent to Ashecliffe. Dr. John tells him that he's one of the most dangerous patients that they have, and unless he realizes the truth about himself, they will lobotomize him and make him manageable. The past couple of days, they were attempting to do a massive roleplay to get him to realize the truth, and Chuck is a psychiatrist named Dr. Shaheen who agreed to play along with Teddy's fantasy in order to keep tabs on him. Dr. John tells Teddy that his real name is Andrew and that his wife's name was Rachel, and the doctor also mentions that George is a patient who got beaten up by him, and the reason why he beat him up was because George called him by his real name. Teddy grabs his gun off the table and shoots Dr. John, whose blood splashes against the wall. And in a moment, there was no blood, and Dr. John tells him that the gun was a toy gun that they gave him when they began the roleplay. And we finally see a flashback where Teddy is Andrew, a US Marshal who was married to Dolores, who he loved very much, and they had 3 kids, but Dolores was insane and manic depressive, and she also wanted to off herself, and people tried to tell Andrew that he needed to get help for his wife, but Andrew drank and kept ignoring them. And one day when Andrew was out for work, Dolores drowned 3 of her kids, and Andrew was horrified at the sight of his 3 dead kids, and he shot his wife right then and there. He blamed himself for their deaths and for not getting Dolores medical help in time, and he goes completely insane and loses his mind, and because he was unable to face reality, he was admitted to Ward C at the psychiatric facility at Shutter Island. And he is the 67th patient that was mentioned on the note at the beginning of the film. Andrew wakes up and is back to sanity, and he states how everything about Teddy and Rachel was all made up. Dr. John says that they once made really good progress with Andrew 9 months ago, but apparently he regressed. And so, they waited until the next morning to see if Andrew was going to stay sane or regress again, and at the end of the movie, we see Dr. Shaheen approaching Andrew as Chuck to test him if he regressed back again. Andrew says, "We gotta get off this rock, Chuck. Whatever the hell's going on here, it's bad," and Dr. Shaheen gives a disapproving nod to Dr. John, and this indicates that Andrew has regressed back to his insanity again. The staff approach to take away Andrew for the lobotomy, and just then, Andrew tells Dr. Shaheen, "You know, this place makes me wonder which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man." And this actually shows that Andrew has not regressed, he's only acting like he was. He snapped out of his insanity, but now his guilt is not letting him live on. If he discloses that he's not regressed, then Andrew will live on as the monster who took the life of his family, and instead, he decided to revert to Teddy, the good man. And the movie ends as Teddy is taken away for lobotomization. Yeah, a pretty interesting ending for a pretty interesting movie. I hope you guys enjoyed this recap. Make sure to leave a like, leave me a comment, and also subscribe to my channel. I love you guys so much, and I promise to see you on my next recap. Bye.